Like everything was very territorial, but you can cut through that noise by having an open heart and talent. Because it didn't matter what color you were if you were nice with that Krylon can. If you were a dope break dancer, or you had to be part of the culture by hook or crook. You had to earn it.
Yeah.
That's what Brooklyn was about, earning your respect.
I'm Justin J, and this is The Plug. Before Brooklyn became a brand used to sell artisanal coffee or bespoke socks, it represented the raw tenacity, diversity, and boundless creative spirit that spawned cultural legends from the Dodgers to Streisand, Beastie Boys to Bugs Bunny. The vision of John Travolta in black slacks and platform shoes walking down the streets of Bay Ridge eating a slice of pizza to the Bee Gees song Staying Alive is a truly iconic moment in pop culture. The scene completely personifies the hustle, swagger, and grit of a bygone era in Brooklyn history. Today's guest is a Bay Ridge native who fully embodies what it means to be from Brooklyn. He spent the last 5 years creating a living memorial to the borough with an immersive installation called Brooklyn Pop. This jaw-dropping collection features personal items, hip-hop memorabilia, graffiti, movie collectibles, and historical artifacts, all celebrating the neighborhood that shaped him. So how does a kid from the wrong side of the proverbial tracks remain steadfast in his vision to make it out of the hood and parlay a can of Krylon and a microphone into international success? We'll find out as we sit down for a chat with the man that brought Public Enemy to Brooklyn for the first time, turned his tragedy into art, and helped spread Brooklyn love across the globe with his group, the Lords of Brooklyn. Today, painter, recording artist, graffiti artist, author, and creator of a wonderfully heartfelt love letter to the beloved borough of Brooklyn, Mr. Michael Kaves McLEER. All right.
We're here.
We're live.
We're live from the Brooklyn Pop.
Thanks for sitting down, man. I appreciate you taking the time out.
My pleasure.
So for the listeners, we're here at Industry City at this really amazing immersive installation called Brooklyn Pop. It's kind of your love letter to the borough of Brooklyn, and it has a mind-boggling collection of historical artifacts from your youth and from Brooklyn history, hip-hop history, graffiti history. Just to give you an idea, it has a subway car with original props from the Warriors. It has a pizza parlor from Do the Right Thing, an Italian social club, a Fast Eddie hot rod, Wolfman Jack's radio station, a Saturday Night Fever disco floor. I mean, just countless other pieces of cool memorabilia. I can't even begin to describe it effectively, so I'm going to let you describe what exactly is this and what inspired you to spend 5 years putting this installation together.
Yeah, wow. Now that I'm hearing it, you say it back. It's been quite the lift, right? Because I mean, it started when I was a little child, right? I come from humble beginnings, and I guess every family has a junk drawer, where you keep your little keepsakes and your little things that you find. If it was the Fonzie button or the Kiss belt buckle or later on the 3-finger ring or something, right? Like I started out with piece books as a graffiti artist, and that was my first kind of like journaling. The piece book became the journal. Like my work and my art was starting to become something that I would do every day, sit in the corner and really hone in and work on this. But I come from a family of storytellers, I guess. They're great storytellers, and we didn't have much. My grandparents had this, but what they had was this incredible story and this incredible photo collection. So I mean, I'm trying to go back in my memory, see where did this spark come from, right? And they had these photos that they really felt like they looked like Hollywood stars. My grandfather came out of the Battle of the Bulge, World War II, came to Bay Ridge, met my nanny, Marie from the Catroni sisters. She was looked like Rita Hayworth. And at a young age, I just thought, I was just captivated by it. And it just, I guess there was some sort of calling as over the years, I just held on to these objects. If it was the Fonzie bed sheets, I felt like as an artist, I would be important someday. And maybe that was just because I was in a fucked up situation and I had a dream about something. And I was like, these things, like, I covered them because they will tell one day a story in a museum or something. I never even been to a museum, but I was like, if they ever came calling for my work,
you're ready.
I'll have the stuff.
I found so fascinating because some of the pieces here, you obviously collected as an adult, but there's a lot of stuff that you just mentioned that was from your childhood, whether it was like your early graffiti notebooks, your markers, the Fonzie sheets, which I love. They're from your original bedroom. But I mean, it takes a real sense of, kind of self-awareness and importance to think that someday this stuff's going to be valuable. And, later in your life, you become Kaves and you start writing graffiti, and you have this kind of persona that you develop, and you're the first person to bring Public Enemy to Brooklyn, and you booked them in this club. And I remember you saying when you walked in that club, you felt like Tony Manero from Saturday Night Fever. Yeah. But where did you get the confidence and the foresight before you had the accomplishments to back that up? It was just in you?
I tell a story throughout this exhibit, and you start out with my nanny. Like I said, like she wanted to be a singer and an actress because she came from a turbulent background. The father was abusive. Coming from Italy, he was an opera singer, and when he came to America, he was a tailor, and he was pissed, right? And he also was this Mussolini sympathizer, so he was half nuts too, And from the trauma in their household, she took solace in the cinema. So when she would record records at Woolworths, it was a 5 and dime store in the neighborhood, and you could record a vinyl record pressing. And she had a beautiful voice. And she was on record. So when I was a little child, I was, my nanny's famous. She's like a recording artist, but she was really just, a wannabe recording artist that was really too scared to come out of, the neighborhood. So, and my parents were super cool. They met when they were like 18 and 21. They eloped, like on some Bonnie and Clyde shit. And they had a cool record collection. Motown, doo-wop, Stones, Led Zeppelin, and they collected little records. And they didn't have much, like I said, we didn't, but they had cool shit. My father he had a 55 Chevy Hot Rod, and my baby shoes would dangle from the mirror. And my mom was this hippie chick that was creative, right? He was cool and she was creative, and she was beautiful. He was also a great looking guy. So they had Hollywood good looks, and they were young and crazy and wild. And as we started coming up, I guess they took us to our first Kiss concert, and we were collecting Kiss shit, like go to the Lofts candy store and go collect the Kiss cards. And I was into Evel Knievel, and like anything I can collect Evel Knievel. And as a kid in the 70s, the imagination ran wild. It was like Evel Knievel, Fonzie, Kiss. Peter Criss was from Brooklyn, so there was that connection, and everything was based in Brooklyn, around Brooklyn, and Brooklyn was always in my mantra because my father was always very proud about being from a greaser gang called Pigtown in Brooklyn, and we would hear about Barbara Streisand or I went to his high school and Neil Diamond, like, you were constantly like hearing about cool shit. So as a little kid, I'm surrounded by this kind of young parents that were hip and cool. So it shapes you as, like, all right, I want to be cool too, And
it sounds like you were exposed to this concept of collecting and memorializing and documenting from an early age. It
was a street culture. My father turned me on to like the Lords of Flatbush movie and was like, oh, they got this from me. So I was like, oh, word, like the call, like all this kind of hip street shit for that era. And my mother was into Hendrix and Joplin, and their friends were fucking crazy, and it was like a Brooklyn experience as a child. And then shit hit the fan because they got divorced, right? And that's where a young kid at 10 years old, my brother's 9 years old, and my sister was just born, and then boom, like it all blows up. And it was very wild anyway, because it was kids raising kids.
So so your mom, she had you young enough where there wasn't a huge generation gap. It sounds like you were part of her culture.
Yeah, there was that relationship. It was like a mother, but also a friend. And she was going through it hard, and I was old enough just to feel her pain.
So, I moved to New York City from California when I was 18. And admittedly, I was a little bit cocky about wanting to live in Manhattan. I think I came from this mindset of, well, I'm not going to move all the way across the fucking country to not be in the thick of it. I want to be in the city. I'm not living in Brooklyn. And, my perception has definitely changed since then. But, Brooklyn has also changed significantly since then. And, Brooklyn's kind of become this pop culture buzzword in a way. It's a marketable brand. Right. And, part of that perception, though, is also, it includes this almost cartoonishly cliche version of the Williamsburg hipster with a mustache and a fixed gear bicycle hanging out in a bespoke cocktail bar or whatever, you know.
What a trip.
But I mean, that's what I love about this exhibit, is because this goes much deeper than that. I mean, this is really a love letter to the Brooklyn that you grew up in, the Brooklyn that you loved. And, for somebody who's never been to New York before or has never been to Brooklyn, like, what do you think is most misunderstood, or what do you think that they should know about Brooklyn's history, culturally and historically?
Yeah, we would have to do a 20-hour podcast. They called us leftovers, right? And that's was like when the new Brooklyn, that they would call it the new Brooklyn, they would say, oh, there's some leftovers, right? That was something that I was kind of used to always being called names for being from Brooklyn, right? Because we were the underdogs. And we were always looked down as the less than's, because we're not from, because Manhattan was the place that, you became something. Brooklyn was the place where you worked. To become something, you really had to fucking work for it. So you were looked at as it was more like the underdogs. And it was like, culturally, it was always the immigrants coming here through Ellis Island or through wherever they were coming from. And Brooklyn was the cheaper place to live. It was farmland. It was places where you were lucky you could walk through it in the beginnings of it. It was all pig farms, and it was if you go back, it was really a fucking tough place to come up in. So you have all of these poor immigrants learning they better get together or learn each other's culture or kill each other. And it was always looked down on. So when I started the Lordz of Brooklyn, because Brooklyn was everything to me, and that was the flag I was going to carry, because it was so important to me. It was still looked at as, you get your shit taken if you go to Brooklyn, And we had a kind of, when we toured the world, we found out that there was a crazy respect for that underdog working class. We're going to get up, you're going to get knocked down, but we're going to keep getting back up. That was the Brooklyn I came from. It was like,
and it has a worldwide profile for that.
And that's where that's where the films and the music and because I don't think anywhere in the world produce as many celebrities and entertainers and poets and comics and singers and filmmakers and actors. This is the place.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I think I enjoyed most about this installation is that it's so dynamic and varied in its content, and it's very autobiographical, and it's very personal. And I think that's what kind of provides context for all this stuff. But at the same time, it would have been really easy to focus mostly on hip hop or mostly on graffiti or, things that are very, very personal to you.
Right.
But instead, I think there's material in here that resonates with people from any generation or any background, from the Brooklyn Dodgers to Barbra Streisand to Bobby Fischer to the Honeymooners. What have you been most surprised at the content that resonates with the visitors here? What's the reaction? Is there anything that's been surprising that people really gravitate towards?
I think when they come in, it's not commercial. It's really a love letter, like you said. It's really a deep dream, because the immersive experience is called the Brooklyn Dream. It's almost like a dream, and it goes through time, and these are the personal things that influenced me and inspired me as a kid that was from a broken home. So this is the stuff I looked at and looked up to. Like, I knew that if there was a Barbra Streisand or a Spike Lee, it gave me the motivation to be the filmmaker or the artist or the actor or whatever I wanted to be as a creative. And it gave me the real inspiration. So this was purely out of love and devotion to a borough. And of course, it's very popular. But what I could do is like at least pay homage to the, most people don't know their great-grandparents or their grandparents, or to tell a story about it. I was lucky enough to have that. And and to pay homage to the people that were here before us. I started off with the Brooklyn Dodgers because the Dodgers, if you want to talk about a brand, the Brooklyn brand started with the Dodgers. And you could say Arthur Miller, and you could say Walt Whitman, and there's a lot of notables, and you can go on and on and on. But the Dodgers is where people fucking put their shirt on and bled for their fucking team, you know? And when they lost, they still were champions to them. And their heart, it was their blood, it was their soul. And
then they got their heart broken.
Yeah, and then they got their heart broken. But before that happened, there was a Jackie Robinson. And there's these immigrants there's these sons of immigrants on this team that lived in Brooklyn. Italian, Jewish, Irish. This team is a multicultural, and then African American to add to the. So this is where, and times were fucking crazy, and it was like, but you seen these teammates become a team and would fight for each other's like brothers, and they lived down the fucking block from me where I grew up. So I came from an apartment building life, right? Like the wrong side of the tracks, and all that you wanted was to get the white picket fence house for your mother. That's a Brooklyn boy's dream. Brooklyn to Hollywood, or Brooklyn boy makes good, get the house for your mama and a Cadillac for your father. So my first house I bought, little did I know, is that on Wogan Terrace in Bay Ridge, the Dodgers lived there, and Pee Wee Reese and Duke Schneider. And just to know that these guys are living in your neighborhood, and they would be at the barber shop, and they were a team that lived amongst a team. So many teams want to have this kind of like pedigree. Brooklyn pedigree in a team was they were your next door neighbor. So this is what I started out the exhibit with, because to me it goes back far enough, because your grandfather's going to relate to it, because they're going to know what it's like to sit in that chair at Ebbets Field chair and that I got over there. And they're going to know, you see Jackie Robinson's cleats there, to know what it was to walk in that man's shoe, to get to be the first.
Yeah, it's a really wonderful way to start off the exhibit, to kind of set the tone.
Yeah, and like that's the hardest shoes to be in, is Jackie Robinson's, because they had to boo him and throw shit at him until he won them over. And then once they were won over, what it did for the borough. It's like white kids were rooting for Jackie Robinson. It was that thing, just like hip hop music, just like the jazz and stuff like that. It's just like, how many people love pizza? How many people love, just like these pieces of culture from all this incredible, like, it's what makes the fabric of Brooklyn. And then you have all these entertainers that celebrate that and were inspired. And I started off there, and then I go right into, fucking everybody loves Bugs Bunny. Well, he's from Brooklyn, and then it goes into my grandparents' story, because that's my shit.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting mix of historical documents and personal documents from you that tell an interesting story. One of my favorite parts of the collection are the items from Saturday Night Fever.
Yeah.
And John Travolta played the character Tony Manero. He was from your neighborhood.
Yeah.
The movie was set in Bay Ridge.
Yeah.
And, I think a lot of people look at that movie and remember it as being about nightlife or dancing or disco, but it's actually a really dark story about yearning and dreaming for a more successful future, and sometimes the situations and friends and people that stand in the way of you fulfilling those dreams. And, I know you identified a lot with Tony a lot growing up as one of the first depictions of your neighborhood in mainstream culture. Talk to me about how that movie helped shape your resolve to experience a world beyond Bay Ridge and to find success outside of your neighborhood.
Yeah, it was super important to me, because that was when shit was broken, right? My home was like we moved back to our old neighborhood. My mother's old neighbor, she was raised there. My grandmother was raised there. And my father was from Flatbush. And when we moved back to that block, it was me, my brother Adam, and my little sister Chrissy, and my hippie chick mom, beautiful. Like, she came from that neighborhood. They used to call it Little 92nd Street. Now, 92nd Street is where you get onto the Verranzano Bridge. And she grew up there, and she could have had anything or been anything, but she loved dysfunctional men, or she just fell in love at an early age. And she came back kind of with her tail between her legs, in a sense, because people envied her. And I had I had like crazy emails from students in a class how she was everybody's crush and everything. So she comes back and she's a waitress, and then, you know, we're on welfare and we're in this apartment building surrounded by these $1 million houses, because Bay Ridge is like that. It's like shitty apartment buildings and then incredible houses all along Shore Road, and so we're underneath the shadow of the Verranzano Bridge. We're right tucked underneath it, and of course, you know, we were big fans of Welcome Back, Kotter, and we knew who John Travolta was as Vinnie Barbarino. And that was great to see Brooklyn in the 70s on TV. And it was like, there was a pride there. But when we go to watch him film Saturday Night Fever, and my uncle's car's in the movie, and then it's like, you're like, what? Like, you know, Vinnie Barbarino's down the block. And like it ain't like today where everybody's an influencer, everybody's famous. To see somebody famous
in your neighborhood,
on your block,
set in your neighborhood
that looks like you, and then the movie comes out and it explodes, and then they come back to do part 2, and we see Sylvester Stallone at White Castle with John Travolta, and I get to see the movie on my grandmother had like WHT or HBO, and I get to see it because I was too young to see it in the movie theater. I get to see it, and it does something to me that cinema does. You know, it's like these people become your role models and stuff. And because he's from Bay Ridge and he's got this talent, but he's frustrated and he's outgrowing his friends because he's fucked up. I mean, it's a fucked up movie and they do some fucked up things, but everybody was pretty fucked up. That's the Brooklyn it was. And disco plays a part in the movie because it was by design but in my neighborhood, they were into all music, but mostly rock music. And so that was a little bit like, you had to look through.
Yeah, the disco was atmospheric. It wasn't really what the movie was about.
You had to know that he was having this hamburger and coffee up the block from where I lived. And he's walking, when he talks about Bay Ridge people, he's walking next to my pizzeria. So it burns something in me that maybe I could be like Tony Manero. And not the cliche parts, but the deep down inside, like I don't come from nothing, but I could become something with my talent. And my talent was the spray can, right? And my mom got remarried, and my stepfather wasn't a nice guy, and then things were really fucking hitting really getting hard on me in my house. I would climb up to the top of the building, just a couple of steps up, and when I opened the doors to the rooftop, the Verranzano Bridge sat there on top of me, like I could walk onto it. And at night or you know, dusk, it was a view that was $1 million view in this fucking welfare apartment. And then it felt like for a minute, it was a concrete cathedral, and I was royalty, and that bridge would be a portal to any dream that I had, because why not? Tony Manero did it.
I feel that's so interesting because, you know, you talk about what a powerful physical metaphor that bridge was for you, but you know, historically, the construction of that bridge was really controversial, and it displaced a lot of people. It was actually named after an Italian, kind of as a consolation for the communities that it destroyed. And so I think a lot of people would look at that bridge and think of a reminder of Robert Moses era kind of social engineering and racism. But to you, it represented strength and stability and like a literal path out of the neighborhood.
I always called it my beacon of hope, a symbol of strength, because that bridge was just powerful. And it sat on my block ever since I'm a little kid. I'm just looking at this structure, and the men that built it lived, you know, they live in our neighborhood, and the people that, like, I mean, yes, it destroyed the neighborhood, and that's before my time. But I've seen it as, so here's a funny story. The marathon happens every year, right? And this is how broke we were, right? It's very noisy. The electric that comes off the bridge and the noise that comes off the bridge is always on. So you always hear it. But when the marathon happens, they close the bridge and you hear silence. And as little kids, and this was part of like around the breakdance era when we were really competitive and all that stuff, we would need like outfits, right? Like we would want to like customize our own outfits, and we couldn't afford the Adidas stuff and all that stuff. We were rocking like, instead of 3 stripes, we were rocking 2 stripes, and we had, you know, the phonies instead of the ponies, you know. And but when the marathon happened, see, the Verranzano Bridge became this really magical place, because underneath it was all of this negative space with like wilderness, where the cables come into the catacombs. It's almost like Star Wars inside of it. If you climb in the bridge, it's magical. It's some Harry Potter shit, next level shit. But if you hang out in the right spot, and this place would become my art gallery. You waited for the runners to run over. And when they got to the end of the bridge, they were too hot. And it's November. And they would start throwing off their clothes and their hats that they were sponsored by Nike, Adidas, whatever it was. And it would cascade us. We would stand under it and we would get all of this new, fresh gear, brand new shit.
Falling from the sky.
Falling from the sky.
Wow.
Every once in a while, a truck would crash off it, and it would be booze laying underneath there. We would always find like treasures, underneath the Verranzano Bridge. And that bridge would be the place when that I would go to my roof, and I would people do it now and they talk about it now, and I didn't know what it was. Maybe it was praying, right, or manifesting. And I would say, this bridge one day will take me. And I was very much into my mother threw me into a martial arts school because there was a lot of bullies. She's a single mom, and I go to this martial arts school in Bay Ridge. They taught me how to meditate. So I'm up on the roof fucking saying, okay, I want to be the biggest graffiti artist in the world, and this bridge is going to take me. And I would go up there when I wanted to be a rapper or whatever. And I would just visualize it. And people would take pictures of me and video later on because that would be my spot. And that, I also take, Lucky Girl up there and, and you look at the stars or the submarine races or whatever. So Saturday Night Fever was more than the movie to me. And Tony Manero was a saint to me. He would be Saint Anthony.
It's interesting. It's actually kind of beautiful how that bridge in particular might mean something completely different to a generation before you, but it became such a special place to you, as a product of your yearning and what it represented towards you.
Yeah, I think we also share with that bridge. Also, I heard Wu-Tang Clan's a big fan of that bridge as well. I think they were doing the same shit on the other side in Staten Island, and that bridge also connected me to Staten Island. And later, I could tell you how Bay Ridge got connected to Staten Island in a graffiti way.
I'm curious about the kind of social politics of your neighborhood growing up, because Biggie famously rapped that you either are slinging crack rock or you got a wicked jump shot.
Yeah.
What were some of the realistic or traditional paths out of your neighborhood?
Well, my saying was always, you either grew up to be a gangster or a cop. Because in any given restaurant in my neighborhood, one side of the restaurant would be gangsters and one side would be cops. And that was it. That was kind of a reality to us. And of course, there was sports. It's a very it's a very working class, very conservative, but it's very... Listen, Bay Ridge has the most bars and pizzerias in all of the world at one time. It was in the Guinness Book of World Record for 3 Mile. But the bars, there's a lot of depression growing up. There's so much bars there, and that's where that was like where you graduated to. It went from the park, drinking kegs of beer and trying to become old enough and tough enough to graduate to get into the pub or the bar. It was a pub nightlife. It was there wasn't a lot of people, a lot of things that, look up to. The gangsters were, that was shiny things, the cars, and the cops also, that was a tough and noble thing. And
that was a viable way out.
Yeah, and you know what? And if you got the sanitation job on the broom, you were set. And that's what you looked forward to in my neighborhood at that point.
One of my other favorite parts of the installation are the memorabilia from Welcome Back, Kotter.
Yeah.
And for the listeners that are too young to remember, Welcome Back, Kotter was a really popular TV show set in Brooklyn, and it made John Travolta a huge breakout star.
Yeah.
But his crew of friends in the show, they called themselves the Sweat Hogs.
Sweat Hogs, yeah.
And the Sweat Hogs consisted of Freddie Boom Boom Washington, black, Juan Epstein, half Jewish, half Puerto Rican, Vinnie Barbarino, Italian, Horshack, Jewish. At face value, it would seem like a really ridiculous and unlikely group of people that would hang out together. But you mentioned something really interesting, and you said that in a lot of ways, the Sweat Hogs actually really did resemble the diversity of your crew growing up.
Yeah,
I mean, you were from the proverbial wrong side of the tracks. You came from a broken home. I mean, did you find that the shared experiences of social class outweighed the differences of ethnicity and race? Because it seems like today we're just so much more self-segregated.
Yeah, we are. I mean, listen, when you came from Bay Ridge, listen, and there's a lot of incredible, beautiful people there, but you were looked at and stereotyped. Bensonhurst and Bay Ridge was a racist place to live. and it was stereotyped at this way. I mean, maybe rightfully so. There was a lot of that shit that went down. But when you don't go to private schools and you don't go to even, like it was public school or Catholic school, and Catholic school costed money. Public school, if you were broke, you were in public school. My mom, she was this amazing hippie chick, right? So of course she was open-minded, but it was the rides to the first time I seen graffiti was taking a train ride to the welfare downtown. And she would take me because I was the oldest. And she was just, as tough as she was, she needed someone to lean on. So she would take me with her, and they would give her shit. They would make her feel like shit because what the fuck are you doing here collecting welfare? You're a beautiful white woman. Like, what are you doing here? And she needed it just like anybody else. She was fucking, a waitress, salary wasn't cutting it, but she was super cool. She would look at all these people around you. Look, Black, Puerto Rican, Asian, doesn't matter. Like, you're not better than anybody, but you have a shot. You have that talent of yours, and that, and you could do something. You could, with your talent, you can make something of yourself, and she said, we're all in the same boat. Let that talent be your oar, and that was something that resonated with me, because then when I go back to we would go back to the block, and the kids that were going to the pools and poly prep and whatever else, we were sitting, in the fucking street, writing graffiti and chalk and opening up the fire hydrant. So my friends became the kids that were in the same boat. And it happened, one of my best friends at the time who became my godbrother was a Puerto Rican kid. And one of my best friends, he was Black and he lived on the Army base. And there was black people in Bay Ridge that were working like upper middle class, that were a lot better than what I had going on. And they lived on the Army base, which was beautiful, but everybody tries to like paint a picture when they don't know any better, right?
Yeah.
What happens is that my friend Joey Hernandez, he has family in Sunset Park and also in Manhattan. And he comes into my hallway one day and he's got a cousin named Chino from New York City Breakers. And this is what he told us back then, right? So he comes in our hallway and he shows us floor work and a backspin, and it blew our fucking minds. Now, this is how culture, this is how hip hop. I'm writing graffiti at the time. I started at 10 years old writing graffiti. He doesn't write graffiti, but I show him graffiti, and we share in this thing. And this is a New York City thing that's happening.
And was there a crew at that point? Because obviously this is pre-internet. This is you didn't get it from television. You didn't get it from the internet.
Yeah, we got it off the street.
But who turned you on to that? There was a scene already?
Yeah, when I moved on the block, it was 1979. And the movie The Warriors, that's why there's a dedication to the Warriors. The Warriors had everybody going, racking up El Marcos and writing in their staircases. That's where I started writing graffiti, but it wasn't serious yet. In that movie, if you think about the movie, think about the crew of the Warriors, like the Sweat Hogs. They're Black, white, Puerto Rican. There's a Brooklyn, and that like for us is our shit. That resembles who we are and what our crew is. And we mimic, like life imitates art, art imitates life. These movies not only inspire us, they raise us. It gives us our first understanding as we're coming of age. And say if your father's not in the house, and you need a male role model. Well, guess what? It's going to be Sylvester Stallone in Rocky, or John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever, or the Warriors. So when my mom moves us back to 92nd Street, little do I know, like graffiti's on fire. And on my block was a crew called the Bad Racket. And these kids were all already graffiti writers from the 70s that evolved. This is 1979, early 80s. And I move in on that block, and everybody has a marker in their back pocket. And then I'm hip to it anyway because of the Warriors shit. And I'm like, okay, graffiti's on. And I'm going on those train rides with my mother. I see it, and I'm an artist. I started, drawing since I'm a child, and I'm talented. I was a kid in class that was the artist. There's always the artist kid, right? I was the artist kid. Was you. When we jumped around a little bit, we went to Sheepshead Bay for a couple of years, and music, of course, is a big part of my mother's life and my father's life. And she's rocking Donna Summers. Matter of fact, when she was breaking up with my father, she smashed the Donna Summers record to pieces. So I can't never listen to MacArthur's Park, all that, because it brings back her pain. But she did bring us home the 12-inch of Rapper's Delight. The Rapper's Delight ran through all of the boroughs. So cats that were into disco, rock, rap wasn't like such a thing. It was just disco and this, whatever this is, right? In my neighborhood, I mean, it's such a thing in parts of Brooklyn and the Bronx and all over, but little kids only learn a certain way, right? I can't say, oh, I was there in 1972 when Cougar, no. Yeah. I was there when my mother brought the record into the house and we turned it on. Like it was so new and innovative. This is how crazy it goes back. And I know I jump around a little bit, but you got me folkloring here. When I'm in the 5th grade, you know, Vinnie Barbarino and What's Happening, you know, you had Rerun doing the Rerun, and you had Vinnie Barbarino doing his dance. And then in Sheepshead Bay at the time, there was a place called Roller Palace where there was a disco roller skating ring. I was living on Voorhees Avenue, and there's a bunch of cool girls there and a bunch of cats there, and they're all doing something called the Freak. And it's a dance to freak out. And if you were on Manhattan Beach or Coney Island Beach on the boardwalk that summer, you were hearing Freak Out and the dance called the Freak. And my mother had a friend and her son's name was Paul Calabrese. And Paul Calabrese showed me how to do the Freak. And now I mixed the Freak with a little Rerun and a little Vinnie Barbarino, and I had a dance routine. And then my little brother is a year and a half younger than me. And he doesn't remember this shit, but he was my little man. So he was my dance partner. So in school, in the 5th grade, the teachers, like after lunch, you could either hang out or they do something special. They said, okay, everybody after lunch, we want you to watch Michael McLEER and his brother. So we stop this, we do a dance routine and we have paperboy hats on and we play Rapper's Delight and we do a dance routine. And I do a split and I throw the hat to my brother throws it back. But that was me wanting that love and admiration for this kind of entertainment, this kind of that's in our blood. My mom's a dancer. My grandmother's a dancer and singer. She was like ill. The Quattroni sisters were like the Lindy and all of that shit. They were ill. And it was just in my blood. And that was like the want that famous and the fame. When I showed up on that block and that graffiti was another way to find our voice. Wow. So the dancing and so we're into the Rapper's Delight. We come to this block. It's mostly rock kids listening to like Hesher shit, like with Deep Purple and fucking Hot Tuner and like real weird. They were almost like they were like Vietnam fathers that their kids were kind of like rock dudes. They wore military jackets and then I showed up with like a pair of Sergio Valentes on. I just got my ass kicked. So I better adapt. These kids are graffiti writers. Let me see what this is all about. And an older graffiti writer happened to had a crush on my sister's babysitter. And, long story short, he dubs me Kaves, and then I added the E. And I have a baptism in the street of finding a voice. So that's what I'm saying. I shared it with my friend Joey, Troy, who came in from the Army base, and we had this like little fucking sweat hog crew that we were, all over the streets, latchkey kids getting in trouble all over the, jumping on trains and Tom Sawyering it throughout the city.
I love the like kind of cross-pollination and the multi-diversity. It's just like this.
It's Brooklyn.
It's Brooklyn.
Yeah. This is Brooklyn, the Brooklyn that I love, and the Brooklyn. And it's not always love. There was war, there was beef, there was. I drove through Bensonhurst one time and my man Troy was in the back of the car and they threw bottles at the car and they were listening to Run DMC, but definitely shouting out the N-word because New York was broke, on fire, like all sorts of shit. And it was trying to grow up. And it took a lot of growing up, and we see it now with this hipster place to live. But you couldn't ride those little bicycles through the Marcy. You couldn't do any of those shit. Like everything was very territorial, but you can cut through that noise by having an open heart and talent. Because it didn't matter what color you were if you were nice with that Krylon can. If you were nice if you were a dope break dancer, or you had to be part of the culture by hook or crook. You had to earn it. Yeah. That's what Brooklyn was about, earning your respect.
So this exhibit ends with what I would assume is one of the most personal and poignant parts of the installation. And, you eventually got introduced to Rick Rubin, and you had a hip hop group, Lords of Brooklyn. They got a record deal, and you actually figured out a method to get out of the neighborhood and to literally like travel and see the world. And, there's an entire wall of records and photos and backstage passes kind of documenting this era of your life. But rather than the exhibit ending and being this kind of upbeat crescendo, it's a really bittersweet part of the installation because something really tragic happened to you, like right before you were about to really achieve some success.
Yeah.
Can you talk about why that wall is so important to you?
It starts out with the street corner where we lost my mother and sister. And she was a true champion and our biggest cheerleader and our bigger inspiration of sacrifice and tenacity, and just watching her give us a Christmas, You'll see the Christmas tree in here. That was a feat for a single mom back then. And as crazy as my parents' relationship was and all that stuff, I got something from my father, and that was like the coolness of Brooklyn. And I got from my mother the heart, right? And the sacrifice. But when we lost my mother and little baby sister, it was a point in anybody's life where you just that Verranzano Bridge could have been the end of me because I would have jumped off of it. Many times I thought about it, but I had a family to take care of because I had siblings that were left motherless, right? And, my stepfather split, and I had a 6-year-old brother to raise, and my 16-year-old sister, and then my brother Adam was a year and a half. Like, it was my job as the adult. Luckily, my girlfriend moved in with me, and her parents were strict Sicilian, and she sacrificed. Another, like, incredible women will sacrifice.
So you made a promise to your mom.
Yeah.
And that wall is kind of the visual representation of that. You want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, I mean, we made up, my mom we would have coffee in the morning and dream and talk about our dream. And her dream was to see us succeed. And she would joke like, oh, you're going to take, it was Brooklyn to Hollywood. That was always the dream. And she goes, you guys, when you become famous, you're going to take me with you, right? Right before that was going to happen, I mean, really to the date of record deals and all of that, we lose them. So there's a corner in Bay Ridge where it happened, and the person's never been caught, right? And it was such a sad place. But I wanted to change the narrative a couple of years ago, maybe 10 years ago. And I painted a mural in that corner of their beauty and them smiling down on the street to show people that it's possible to change the narrative of your life. Don't let tragedy define you, right? And that hallway starts off with that corner in a cardboard box. Because my mother used to watch us for hours break dance on that cardboard box. And she knew if we found a piece of cardboard, we could turn that into a dance floor or a fort. With a child's imagination and creativity, the world is really yours. And she was always a supporter of that. And so how could we let her die in vain when we knew we had a mission? And that was to, show the world that this is what Brooklyn's about. The Lords of Brooklyn became a symbol of that. And I'm not the only, and our bandmates that we put in the band too had tragedies that year too as well. So it was a group of kids that banded together, led by myself and my brother, that we were going to bring Brooklyn around the world and tell the story of our parents and of the struggle. And we did that. And we not only had one record deal, we had 8 record deals. And we had a cult following, and we've been around the world. And we did our thing. And this was 30 years to the date of when my parents, when my mom and sister were gone, and the Lords of Brooklyn was signed. So we're celebrating our love and victories, but then it's also a victory for Brooklyn, because we're like sons of Brooklyn that were truly, with the Brooklyn spirit, was able to arise above all this incredible odds.
It's like saying, Brooklyn, we did it.
Yeah, Brooklyn. I mean, this is the one really chilling part. I can't recreate it here, but maybe I could show a video of it. Right after all this was going on, we fly to Amsterdam or Rotterdam or one of these places, and we get on stage and we perform real quick. But as far as your eye could see, it's one of these places where there's like 40,000 people, and our record is breaking out. And we get off stage, and then you hear a thunder. You hear one of those soccer chances, dum, dum, boom, 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 boom. Brooklyn's in the house. Brooklyn's in the house. And I turned around to my manager at the time, Mark Pearson, and he goes, yeah, that's for you. And I couldn't nothing hold back the tears because I was like, Ma, look. And we run out on stage and we do an encore. And that's where the movie could have ended, right? On that. But then, of course, you come home and they're not here. So as an artist, you have to dig deep. And this is a piece of artwork that is my love letter to all of it, and saying, this is for you, Brooklyn. This is for you, Ma. It's, they say it takes a neighborhood, it takes a village. I say it takes a neighborhood. Yeah, they say it takes a village. I say it takes a neighborhood, and that's why we're here.
You did it's a wonderful, really wonderful execution.
Thank you.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
I want to get your take on the philosophy behind writing graffiti.
Yeah.
I'm not a graffiti writer, but it always seems like, graffiti started not just as a creative expression, but I always thought of it more as like kind of a subliminal attempt in some way to be immortal in some small way, like a way to leave your mark on the world beyond a physical presence, And graffiti culture, it developed in an era where New York was in a horrible decline. There's lots of poverty. There was large communities of people that had really been forgotten and had no agency or pathway to participate in the American dream. So, going all city and having thousands of people know your name, it must have really provided a sense of self-worth and communication that wasn't really available to them in other ways. But, in today's world with social media, everyone has a voice, maybe too many people, like every teenager has the means to insert themselves into the culture with their phone. So, in an age of digital technology and social media, is it still relevant? I mean, at least philosophically, like what's the current state of graffiti?
I mean, that'd be a question for like somebody a lot younger than me now. But I could tell you what it did for me. It opened up a world to me. I'm still a professional graffiti artist. That's first. And my work affords me to do all of this stuff. So it was amazing that an art form by children, created for children, still resonates the way it does, but it resonates in a bigger language, right? But I guess it comes back to our need as human beings to leave something behind. The internet has a lot of shit on it, and a lot of it's disposable. And we see this now. It's just quick likes and quick stuff. Graffiti, as much as it's ephemeral, it's you're still making the effort to paint and mark something with something that you feel like is a cry or a word or something of a masterpiece that you could leave behind and get recognition that you don't have to pay for. And we robbed our supplies. We did whatever we could to make that mark. And people would do it with etching their name. A pray was a etching to show that we were here and that we meant something. Or you like to believe that it is for a reason. And if you have faith, you say, sure. But while I'm here, I want you to, know my name. Or I was lucky enough to be in a movie as a graffiti artist in Paris. A friend of mine, Aurel, had me in this film. And one of the parts of the film was to go down into the catacombs under Paris. And there was graffiti from the Roman soldiers. And it blew my fucking mind. And it was like, Cosmo gives good head or whatever it was. It was whatever. Whatever it was. It was like something fucked up. But it was like Roman soldiers fucking ranking out on each other or whatever. Or just I was here, such and such, Roman numerals. And it was fucking amazing to me to know that as much of a special snowflake I think I am, there was somebody before me dreaming about the same shit, hanging out in a tunnel somewhere underneath, Paris.
It seems like your experience it's such a special time to have gotten into it because it's not just a creative pursuit. It's not just an art form. It was a lifestyle.
Oh, have you
almost a lifestyle first before the art form?
It was the Brooklyn way. I come back to that all the time. Biggie said it best: "Spread love. It's the Brooklyn way." But the Brooklyn way to me is like a philosophy. It was a way, a life. It was really a group of kids finding something that they were good at, and society was, like they were rebellious. They were risking it all just for that brief moment of fame to say that they counted, and it turned into this incredible thing. And what it taught you as a child, branding and marketing and persistence and tenacity, all of that shit comes from and it's always in me as a young writer. I'm going to be competitive, and I'm going to try to build out on the next masterpiece. It's going to be bigger and more elaborate. It's going to be something that I want my friends to try to top. Like, that's the graffiti kind of the way.
That's an interesting way of putting it. It's youth branding ultimately.
Oh yeah, and now it's, I mean, obviously, you know, everywhere, AP watch, Cause watch, it's fucking nuts. And you know, what big brand hasn't tapped into the graffiti culture? And, you know, the hip hop culture and the rock culture and all that New York street culture, that New York, you know, punk rock, like this part of the world, we bring it. You know, and if I'm going to do an exhibit, I better bring it.
Well, you fucking did, man. Yeah. Well done.
Thank you.
We always like to end the podcast by asking the guest to give a shout out and plug something that they feel isn't really getting enough attention, something that they're not personally involved in, like whether it's a book, a movie, an artist, a social cause. Is there something that you want to just give a little shine to that you've been really feeling lately?
This has been just 5 years in the making, and 1 year of my life not even coming out the door. And I'm just trying to like inspire the next generation of kids that, you know, let's talk about something. The kids on their phones, I have 4 of them. It's a problem. I'm down with technology, and I use some of it in here. It's a tool. Let's not make it a lifestyle, right? And I have a niece that's a filmmaker, and she got out of film school, and she went to teach children at her alma mater, Borough in Brooklyn. And a group of kids that started a movement where they put down their phones. So my niece quit her job as the teacher of them, as a film, like she was a film teacher, to join them into giving up their phones. And she did a documentary on them, and it's going out to film festivals. So that would be something. I mean, while I'm got my blinders on, like Champion in Brooklyn, she's a young woman that's taken to the streets. And I think she just raised $150K on this concept of finishing this film about a group of kids in Brooklyn that put down their social media and their phones.
Wow.
And that could be a movement like the graffiti movement or the hip hop movement. That could be the next movement of young kids taking power over their lives instead of letting the phone dictate it.
You know, doing like what you did, you know, fingertips are for having, blood and spray paint under, not for tapping screens, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's cool for like inspiration on it, but then put it down and go out and create something physical. I mean, this is one reason why I built an immersive experience, is that you could be immersed into something physical and show you how we did it back then and how you could help us do it again. I mean, like I have young kids interning here, and I definitely always keep close, like my ear to the street. I want to support the next generation of storytellers and folklorists, and you know, I guess support my community.
Yeah. Well, this is a beautiful love letter to that community. Just once again, for anybody that's going to be in New York City, this is a must-see. You have to come check it out. It takes a little effort to get here. It's an industry city. It's a little difficult to find, but I promise you it's worth it. Nothing easy comes without a little struggle. And it's called Brooklyn Pop. So come check it out, Industry City. Kaves.
I appreciate you.
I'm blown away, man.
Thank you.
I'm in awe of what you put together here, and it's you did something really special.
Oh, this is a family operated thing that from our family to yours, you know?
Right on. Talk to you soon, man.
All right. Peace.
Thanks for listening, and a huge thanks to today's guest for dropping in. If you enjoyed this episode, do us a favor and take a minute to rate, review, follow, or subscribe. This episode of The Plug contains original theme music by Andrew Van Weingarten and Dan Drohan. Mixing and sound design by Matt Boynton at Ultraviolet Audio. Logo and branding by Italic at italic-studio.com. And you can check out my photography at justinj.com. Thanks again, and be sure to check out the archive and tune in for future conversations.